Happy rainy Sunday here, and welcome back to the Aural Mess podcast. I'm joined today by Phil DeCriscio, who otherwise goes by Steely Phil. Phil has a podcast where, shockingly, he talks about Steely Dan with a variety of guests. I'm doing the same thing. My standard disclaimer is this is not a Steely Dan podcast, but God damn it, we always end up going there. So,
always.
Hi, Phil.
Hey, thanks for having me. Thanks for being on my pod twice, I believe, right? We talked memes and then to Gaucho, and we need to plan Lost Gaucho at some point.
Yes.
But that will be, in the future. And happy to be on this. Have been enjoying following the pod so far, your pod, and you have some cool guests and cool topics. And there's a backlog because I've been busy, but I do plan on. I have a playlist pinned, right, of things I need to keep watching. It's like Aural Mess this episode, some wrestling thing, some Metroid thing, Aural Mess again, some true crime thing, Chad again. So it will happen.
Well, I am honored to be part of that playlist next to those other auspicious videos. So thank you. And thanks for being on. So, we're going to do a theme today, which, I don't usually do, but I'm excited about this one. So we're going to talk about favorite albums. You know me, I've said this a bunch of times. I'm not a big favorite ranking because everything changes for me, pretty much every week, right? Or every day sometimes. But just eternal favorite albums, right? Like things that we just still love, however many years later. And I think the first one we're going to dig into, because it was on both of our lists, was, you want to tee it up?
Imagine this. We have a mutual favorite album, and it's a Steely Dan album. And it is, of course, 1977's masterpiece, Asia.
Yes.
This is my first pressing that actually I got back all the way in high school and did not realize the significance. I only knew Peg and Josie and was like, I'll buy the record. And then I got into Steely Dan about a year ago. And I was looking at all the Matrix stuff because I was getting real deep into it. And I'm like, oh, I've had this first pressing since I was 16. It's a little beat up, the side's a little shredded, but it is, it's my baby. So
it has that aura.
It does. Famously, I only got into Steely Dan a year ago, and it was a very deep, quick, and fiery love affair. And I've since then I've listened to this album probably 100 times. It's an album I will just listen to. Like if I have a half an hour to kill in the car, I'll just put on Asia.
Yeah, same. And I love the fact that, you're such a new sort of convert to the gospel of Steely Dan, but it makes me really happy that, I was just talking to Zamari Jones on a previous episode, and you've had Zamari on your pod, and between you and him and Mackenzie and everybody else that I've sort of encountered on Steely Dan Twitter and Steely Dan Instagram, it's so awesome that this, the generation after mine, as well as the generation after yours, is already getting into Steely Dan, and it just makes me super happy. So,
yeah, I forget who I was talking about with this on my pod, but there's a weird when I was growing up and I thought of Steely Dan, and they can be lumped in more or less with your classic rock groups. Obviously, they're very different, and we'll talk about that maybe using Asia as the catalyst. But there's always this kind of, because they're so, it's pop jazz fusion, it's not pop rock fusion. So because of the jazz element, Steely Dan was kind of associated, at least in my mind, to kind of the same people that I was going to go see classical concerts with. Like I'd be sitting in the audience, and there'd be some gray hair dozing off next to me when the Philadelphia Orchestra was playing Prokofiev 5, one of the greatest in my opinion, symphonies of all time. And there's just some old guy dozing off, and that's kind of Steely Dan's I think was considered, or maybe still is considered the pop version of that. But I found there's Steely Dan fans that are either 18, 28, or in their 40s. And the older, the boomers more or less are kind of outliers at this point. The ones who reject Two Against Nature and Everything Must Go and think Can't Buy a Thrill's the best album, or Asia, and don't really consider, maybe a Katie Lloyd or Gaucho. But there's this really strong young person base, 30s and younger, that have really embraced Steely Dan. I'm not exactly sure why. I have theories. That it's because everything kind of sucks as a young person. I've accepted. I have my professional job where I have health insurance to get a decent salary, and I work a side job, and I still will never afford a house, and I've kind of accepted that. And then you listen to Steely Dan, and in the 70s, these two guys were singing also about how everything sucks, kind of in that post-Vietnam era. and then pre-Reagan.
Right.
And I think there's a lot, unfortunately, and a lot of the characters that they created, a Deacon Blues or the I don't know, like the King of the World character or a Midnight Cruiser, like all these just sad sax characters. And I think a lot of young people, for better or for worse, relate to that. And then you have, it's just great music, just in general. So I think this kind of this omnipresent depression plus the smooth sounds of Steely Dan kind of really make fans out of like someone like Zamari, who's such a bright young person, and he likes music about the saddest people who ever existed.
Right. And I feel like it's kind of funny because like you said, that the darkest, most cynical, sad ass music probably ever put to tape is backed by the smoothest, easiest to listen to, most complex, musical accompaniment. So it's kind of funny.
Like Gaucho being, being described as 7 of the worst people you could ever meet. The one that when I try to turn people onto Steely Dan, if they're like a concept album person, I put them on the Gaucho because it's kind of a concept album. And it is the smoothest thing you could ever listen to. Like Hey 19, Glamour Profession, Time Out of Mind. It's just like the smoothest, cleanest, Babylon Sisters for sure. And then it's like, it's just so dark and upsetting in the best. But I think part of the reason we love it is that dichotomy, right? Why is, in my opinion, why is the show like The Sopranos so loved? Yeah, it's great characters and great writing, great acting, but it's also, it's not only violence, but it's one of the funniest shows I've ever seen. And then you have a character like Paulie Walnuts who will whack someone in one scene and in the very next tell the worst joke and laugh about it. And I think it's that dichotomy, that absurdity that a lot of people who tend to think or who tend to be book smart really gravitate toward. And I think Steely Dan is just the musical, and one of the many musical embodiments of that. You could say the same thing maybe about the Velvet Underground, or we'll get to the Smiths with me later. It's similar. What draws you to Asia?
I think it's their most cohesive album, and it's funny because we'll dig into this when we start talking about albums. Like I've never really been an album guy. Like I have to love an artist and love every song on an album. Otherwise, like I'm more of a casual listener to some artists. Like I can tell you 20 or 30 of their songs that I like across their catalog, but there might be 30 or 40 more that are album cuts that I just never got into because I never listened to the whole album. Right. Yeah. So I think what draws me to Asia is just, first of all, the musicianship, right? I feel like Royal Scam was a turning point for the band. It's probably arguably one of my favorite albums, even maybe over Asia some days and maybe even over Gaucho some days, which is saying a lot. But I think that sort of set the stage and got them into this space of like, okay, we're honing this craft. We're perfecting this idea of, that whole jazz combination. I mean, even though Royal Scam was more guitar driven, a little heavier sound, I just feel like the writing, the playing, the studio musicians, it became more of a revolving door. And I think that kind of set it up for Asia. So by the time they got to Asia, it was like they were a little older. They had an album out like almost every year in the 70s, pretty much. I mean, they weren't like that much older in between albums, but I feel like a lot went down. And, just something like Black Cow, which again, on the surface seems like a little bouncy, fun song. But when you listen to it, it's like, another fucked up individual.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you're seeing a friend or a lover or an ex-friend or ex-lover just blast it out of their mind at a diner, which is a very New York thing, I would imagine. And then they create this perfect odyssey of a tune around this one idea that is unfortunately maybe very, very common, or was very common, of just someone out in public just being kind of a mess. And Black Cow's interesting. I mean, it's a great start. It opens with that big kind of bass line with its drums and that little bit of guitar. And then as the song progresses, I think this is the most finely orchestrated Steely Dan album. I mean, as good as A Royal Scam is in terms of the writing and the lyrics and the playing, aside from like that weird instrumental break in Green Earrings, it's just kind of like what you would expect from a song. Oh, it's a rock song. Here's the guitar solo. Turns out it's the Kid Charlemagne solo. It's amazing, but it's expected. It's in the trope, right? Like something like a Caves of Altamira. Oh, you have a horn section. There's going to be a horn outro, amazing, one of the best. But something like Black Cow starts off kind of simple, like kind of like a Rockets drum, guitar, bass, vocals, and then as the song progresses, you start getting the background singers, you start getting the horn section, which starts out very sparse, and then eventually it becomes more fully orchestrated. And then at the end, you have that awesome saxophone outro with the girl so outrageous, and like I said, the horns are screaming, but still the rhythm section is still very grounded, very simple. It's a very simple bass line, probably the most simple Chuck Rainey bass line on any of the albums, and a very simple drum by I believe Paul Humphrey. I did a pod yesterday talking about Dan Drummer, so this is more or less fresh in my brain, but it's that odyssey. It's simple, and it gets more complex, harmonically not, but just orchestrationally. And it is such a great test of speakers. And I don't think that's the be-all, end-all of all records. I do have the UHQR because I kind of wanted to see what it would sound like, and it sounds amazing. And I have like a first pressing, like a first and a half pressing, those Canadian colored pressings, and I have a Japanese pressing that's really nice, actually. It's a MCA repress, but it's on really heavy vinyl. But it's just a wonderful album. Song topic, kind of standard stuff about someone on drugs. At least very standard for Steely Dan. And on the outset, it's like I said, I think it's very simple, but they keep adding layers and nothing. It's engineered so perfectly that when they add a texture, whether it's the background singers or the horn section, it just becomes another part of the tune. It doesn't take away, it doesn't bleed into the already established kind of rock solid rhythm section.
Everything breathes on Asia. Every instrument, every part is clear and distinct. Nothing gets buried. Nothing gets lost in the mix, I don't think. Not that I can think of.
No.
And, props to Roger Nichols, obviously. I mean, Donald and Walter, and I think, Gary Katz's ear was also a factor. But I mean, like Roger and I forget who else worked on engineering and mixing on the record, but probably Elliot Shiner, I feel like, was involved in that one.
Wasn't there a woman on that too?
Yeah, Lenise Bent. She did. She was like the assistant engineer, I think. She's awesome, by the way.
Yeah.
You've heard her tell the story about Home at Last.
Yes. I listened to that interview not too long ago. So I'm looking at main engineers: Nichols, Shiner, Bill Schnee, I believe it's
Bill
pronounced,
Schnee, right,
and Al Schmidt, and then assistants: Lenise Bent, Ken Klinger, Linda Tyler, Ed Rack, Joe Bellamy, and Ron Pangalaman. And then it's mastered by Bernie Grunman, which...
Yes, of course.
Yeah, who also, how many years later? So what's the 77 to 2023? What's the time difference on that?
40
something?
6 years, yeah.
He did the remastering on the, I think he's doing all the UHQR.
Yeah.
He at least did Asia. But yeah, it's a perfectly like manicured, I guess for lack of a better word, manicured sound that no other Dan album touches. Gaucho does, but it's also, you said, and I agree that Asia breathes the most, and Gaucho, I think on purpose, is kind of a stranglehold.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's Wendell. I think part of it, like Hey 19, I think is a lot of the kind of stranglehold on that. I think is Wendell. But like Babylon Sisters is all purdy, and it's like a little, and that's I think the appeal of the album is, it's like that meme with Kermit and like the evil Kermit, right? And he's looking with the hood. It's like if normal Kermit is Asia, Gaucho is like evil Kermit. Even though Asia with any other band would be the evil Kermit. This is how Steely Dan is there's like a couple of nice songs on here that are about nice things, kind of.
Sort of, kind of, yeah.
I Got the News. Definitely. Depending on if Josie is coming out of prison or just returning home. Because I
always thought prison. I always thought she was coming back from some shit, like it wasn't just...
They're throwing cherry bombs or battle apples, right? So it's not... even Peg, it's like, what kind of movies are those? And is it just some jilted lover who's just jealous? And then I don't know what Age is about. Like the song.
Yeah, I mean, dime dancing, it speaks to like, I mean, to me, it was always sort of like GIs coming back from the war and, that kind of thing. I mean, at the bottom of it, it's really just, Fagin lusting after like his friend's wife or his cousin's wife or somebody, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was cousins or neighbor's wife. He came back from Vietnam or Korea. I think the timeline, it would be Korea.
Korea, probably, yeah.
And came back with a wife whose name was Asia, I believe, spelled differently. I don't even think he was lusting. I think he just thought it was like, hey, buddy's wife, hi, and then thought it was a cool name, which it is. No, the Fagin Lust song is Ricky, Don't Lose That Number. Yes. The complete Giga Chad move of college Donald Fagin hitting on his professor's pregnant wife. Completely cannot read the room and did the most Giga Chad what did the kids on the internet say? Based, red pilled, just whatever.
I get so much shit for my name, by the way, and like the Giga Chad versus like the Virgin whatever. The Chad Donald Fagin versus the Virgin college professor. That's funny. But the funny thing is, my name wasn't really that popular when I was growing up. I only knew like maybe 2 or 3 other Chads my whole life, So yeah.
It's still not popular. I know you, and then a friend of mine who I work with who is probably your age.
Okay.
And those are the only Chads. I mean, I'm Philip. I mean, I know like 3 other Philips, and one is my father. So
there you go.
Anyway, speaking of Asia, the song, I guess track 2, side 1, track 2, the song Asia. My favorite track on this album, my favorite Steely Dan song, my everything, my blueprint for listening to, someone trying to cover like the drums on that and knowing if they can hack it or not by how tight and how succinct and can they get the stick click in there, sort of thing.
The only drummer I've seen that rivals Gadd on that song is Keith Carlock.
Oh yeah.
No hate to any of the other touring drummers that came before him, but I just feel like that dude's just untouchable.
So I was talking about this with my friend Sam, and we did Dan drummers, and first 2 Dan albums you have Jim Hodder. Third, Pretzel Logic, even though on the surface it looks like Hodder, it's Jim Gordon with a little Porcaro.
Wait, stop right there for a sec. Do you subscribe to Expanding Dan, the newsletter?
Yeah. There was an interview.
I
didn't listen to it or read it. I just saw it. Once again, it's on the list of things to catch up because he was never interviewed, right? More or less.
No, he was never interviewed post Dan. Yeah,
he died in the early 90s, right? He
died in 1990 at like 42 or some like just unimaginable young age. Yeah, he drowned in his swimming pool somehow. But the interview's great. Yeah, and he basically says like I don't think he didn't even really play a note on Pretzel Logic.
No, he sang.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you have on Pretzel Logic it's Jim Murderer Gordon. Because that's I did not know about that, and I was like, oh, who's this Jim Gordon guy? And then I read Wikipedia, and it's like murder. Like it's like career, touring, discography, murder. What?
Yeah. That was another sad story. The dude
it is.
had,
like, he's schizophrenic.
Schizophrenic,
right?
Yeah.
And then Katie lied. They got Porcaro for most of it.
Right.
And it's
who was like 19 years old or 18 years old.
Yeah, he already off from touring with Sonny and Cher, about to start Toto.
Yep.
But it's funny because they were always trying to find their perfect drummer.
Yeah.
And then in Asia is probably with Asia it's 7 tracks, 6 different drummers. Right. Gaucho, it's 7 tracks, I think 4 different drummers, and Wendell. 2 Against Nature is like 10 tracks, 4 or 5 different drummers, and then they on the song 2 Against Nature they got Keith Carlock, right. And that was he was their touring guy ever since, and that he did every single track on Everything Must Go, and has been with them since 1999 2000, and he's like the perfect. What they wanted as a drummer. He could do anything, any style, rock solid. And yeah, because you listen to that, like well, they didn't play Asia on the 93 tour. That was part of the medley at the beginning.
Right.
But I think by like the Art Crimes tour 96, they would play the song Asia. And who was on that? Was that Ricky Lawson?
Yeah, I think it was Ricky Lawson.
He
was a phenomenal drummer.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I love his shuffle when they let him do one of the shuffle tunes.
Yep.
And his Asia is great, but like it's not Steve Gadd, and it's not Keith Carlock. And the fact that Keith Carlock can do it is it just shows how great he is and how much of a special talent he is. Because Asia is one of those tracks that, you know, the pop tune. I mean, cool chord progression, cool harmony, kind of cool cryptic lyrics, and then you get to the instrumental break, and you have Wayne Shorter on the tenor sax.
Oh yeah,
and that's amazing. And underneath you have this drumming, and the Wayne Shorter sax takes away from it. And then on the outro, and it's just Steve Gadd and Donald Fagen doing like the spacey chords.
Yep.
And it's what, a minute and a half outro.
Yeah.
And it's not long enough. I could just listen to, like, when he kicks into the samba thing on the ride cymbal.
Oh god, yeah.
And it fades out. It's like, why could we just ride this out for the rest of the first side of the album?
And that was one take, right? Was it a two-taker?
They did 2 takes. They did not.
Okay.
So apparently what happened, well, they rehearsed, but apparently, so the day before, it was the same rhythm section. So Michael Meridian, Larry Carlton, Denny Dias, Becker, I think, plays bass on Asia. Chuck Rainey plays bass. I thought Becker might be on guitar.
Becker does one of the leads, yeah.
So
it's him, Denny, and Carlton, I think, take turns, yeah.
Yeah, there's Victor Feldman percussion. Anyway, so they rehearsed the day previously with that whole rhythm section, except it was Jim Keltner, who would be
he was on
Josie guy, yeah. The trash can lid guy. And then they come the next day, see the chart, and apparently Chuck was like, I guess we're doing Asia again, but it was Steve Gadd behind the skits. And they rehearsed it, and then when they recorded it, apparently that's when Steve Gadd let it rip.
Yeah.
That's why the famous story is they all stopped. It's not like they were sight reading and stopped. It was because they were used to the take, and then he was just, and that was without the Wayne Shorter sax solo because they punched that in later. Because that solo is stitched together. And then they just stopped. Like the rhythm section stopped, and Steve Gadd was just going at it. And I guess they picked it back up, and then they just did a second take. They being the band, and I'm not sure what drum take was used, but the rhythm take is definitely that second one because it's coherent, it's cohesive. Yeah. It's not some of the best musicians being in all of another one of the best musicians. It's so great.
Yeah.
Deacon Blues.
That was like my big Steely Dan gateway song when I was a young gentleman loser. I used to drive around like late at night and blast that song. You know, I guess when I was feeling sorry for myself about whatever at the time I was feeling sorry about myself about, you know, but that's just still one of my favorite songs. And I can't listen to it really that much anymore. Like I can, but like I have to be in a certain mind frame to listen to that tune. If I'm listening to the album, like I'll let it play through. But like if I'm shuffling just a bunch of Steely Dan stuff on a playlist or whatever, and that comes on, I'm skipping it lately. I feel like, I don't know why.
I'm similar. I do listen to it quite a bit, but I usually just listen to, I'll either just play the song Asia or I'll listen to the album, but sometimes I'll be shuffling and Deacon Blues will come on in. And I think it's because it's that low, it's probably the slowest tune on the album.
Yeah.
Maybe Black Cow. I don't have a BPM side by side, but either Black Cow or Deacon Blues. And it is sad. It's a sad song. It's very relatable. To me, it's like that. Things I Miss the Most is super relatable. What a Shame About Me. Just all the sad loser songs are very relatable to me, for good or for bad. But it's a great tune. Just the typical. Deacon Blues is the Steely Dan character.
Yeah.
I think maybe a Midnight Cruiser prior would be the prototypical, or a Dr. Wu maybe prior. But then Deacon Blues is just sad. Some middle-aged loser just wants to play the saxophone and ends up wrapping his car around a telephone pole because he's down to fifth whiskey.
Well, middle-aged
Scotch,
or
sorry,
Scotch.
Not whiskey,
Yeah,
Scotch.
whoa, hey,
I did that meme, the Jack Daniels meme. I sent it to a buddy who's big into Steely Dan, but he's also a big bourbon whiskey guy. He went to graduate school at the Cincinnati Conservatory of Music, so Kentucky's there. So he got a good. He said he got 2 educations there. So I sent him the meme, and then I was like, "Oh, he'll laugh." And then I just got this wall of text explaining the difference between Scotch whiskey and bourbon. It's like 11 in the morning. I'm like at school. I'm gonna send my buddy a meme in between classes, and then I have to learn. And
But you think it was middle age, or you think he was just, hitting on the other side of late 20s into the 30s? Because that's where Fagan was approaching when he wrote the song, right? And I feel like it was just a guy who's realizing he's losing his youth, not necessarily an older guy looking back. That's how I always read it anyway.
You're probably right. I think not the problem, but the reason I imagine middle-aged is probably just because Donald Fagen has been a 45-year-old man for 76 years, or a 50-year-old man for 76 years.
Yes.
Because what famously when he was a kid living in, after they moved out Passaic, and I think they went to Central Jersey, which does or does not exist, depending on who you ask.
It absolutely exists.
There we go. But he would stay up all night listening to like Symphony Sid and the other jazz radio, and I mean the Night Fly is basically about that. But he was some crotchety old 8-year-old, and then he met Becker in college. When Fagan was a crotchety 20-year-old,
right?
He met a crotchety 18-year-old Walter Becker, and then so all their songs like Hey 19. It is just Donald Fagen being like, I can't hit on. I'm 30 or I'm 28 or I can't hit on 19-year-olds anymore, but it always sounds like it's a 50-year-old guy, not like it's just because he's just crotchety, and which is why I think so many of us younger people love Steely Dan, because we just feel old and depressed, even though when I'm at my job and some of the older people are like, oh, what does a young person do on the weekends? I'm looking around. I'm like, who are you?
Yeah, like who, me?
I listen to my jazz records and pet my cats, and then I play video games from the 90s. Like, what?
my wife laughs at me because, like, I'll see somebody, I'm 52, right? And I'll see somebody who's, like, in their late 50s, early 60s. And I'm like, yeah, this old guy. And she's like, old guy? She's like, he's like our age.
At least you have that youthful spirit.
I don't feel my age. I don't know.
Good.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's a good thing, So, all right. So Deacon Blues sort of segues into.
Well, you got to flip.
Right.
And then it's Peg.
Yes.
So this album is, my one complaint about this album is I feel like the sequencing of songs is off.
Asia should not have been second, in my opinion. They should have saved that for maybe the opener, side 2, or I don't know.
Yeah. And it's over in my crate. I have an 8-track of Asia that I don't have an 8-track player, and I have a cassette of Asia, and the track listing on both of those is different from the LP and different from each other.
Well, that was mechanical, right? Like they had to do it a specific way to fit on a tape, or 8-tracks were just like wacky the way they work. So
yes, I'm going to grab it because the sequencing on the cassette, I think, and I can't remember it off the top of my head, but I think I like it better than the LP.
Yeah, grab it.
Okay, the 8-track, which I actually don't know how 8-tracks work. I assume it's a tape, but they're weird,
it's a tape loop, right? So it's a tape loop, and there are, I don't know if it's physical or it has to be physical because you'd hear it otherwise. How it changes the tracks is, I think there was like a little leader spliced into the tape at certain points, and that's what would make it jump to the next track. I'm not sure why they're tracked out the way they are and how it's laid out, but like it was like a real weird mechanism, and they caught on for like 5 years in the 70s, and then they kind they because like they sucked.
They were the Laserdisc, like they lost the VHS,
right?
Even though Laserdiscs are better than VHS. Anyway, so on the 8-track, starts with Asia, Deacon Blues, like the first half, and then the second half on the next. So I don't know if that would be seamless, or there would be
nope.
Okay,
there would be like a ka-chunk. Yeah, you would get this like ka-chunk, and then it would change, and you have like a second of silence, and then the next track would kick in. So you're getting like this chunk in the middle of Asia, which is hilarious.
So Asia, Deacon Blues, the first part, Deacon Blues, the second part, Josie, which I like Josie after Deacon Blues, Black Cow, I Got the News, which I like that the pairing, and then Peg and Home at Last.
Okay.
Without the ka-chunk in there, that's not a bad sequence. And then the cassette, Asia, Deacon Blues, Josie.
Okay.
Black Cow, I Got the News, Peg, Home at Last.
So those
I like that.
I do. I like that sequence.
I like Home at Last at last.
But that was neither of those track sequences were an artistic decision that was consciously made. That this was an economy decision or an economic decision made by the record company because they wanted to fit as much as they could on as little tape as possible to save production costs, right? So they sort of like, you know, compressed the songs into the right order to make them, you know, as even as possible for side A, side B on the cassette, and however the 8-track loop worked, I guess they'd save tape somehow doing it that way too.
No, for sure. I usually don't like albums that are side A, side B. I kind of like a flow, even if you have to flip it. And I think there's something to be said about a nice bombastic, like Peg, a nice kind of fun opening track on the side. I think this is important. But with Asia, those first 3 tracks are these longer jazz odysseys, especially with Asia. You got the heavy-handed, not heavy-handed, but the heavy emotional nature of Black Cow and Home at Last. And then you get side B, which is like, you have Peg, the song about a woman doing adult film, but it's fun and jazzy and bluesy. You have Home at Last, which is, it's kind of sad because it's just like about life sucking and accepting it, which I guess is fine. And then you have I Got the News, which is about things that we may or may not need to talk about. I would just refer to the lyrics, Spanish Kissin'. And then Josie, which is, you know, even if she just got out of jail, it's a party. Right. So it's like side one's like heavy-handed, not heavy-handed, but it's heavy. It's like jazz. It's you have these great solos in Black Cow and the Peter Crisley solo in Deacon Blues and the Wayne Shorter and Steve Gadd in Asia. And then you have like 4 shorter tracks that are poppier for sure, a little more radio friendly. Because Peg and Josie were 2 of the big singles. I think those 2 and Deacon Blues. I don't know. It's a weird. It's like the Knife Fly. The Knife Fly to me is also very side A, side B.
Yeah.
And like some days I want side A, but I don't want to hear that cover. And then side B, it's like great, but then you have Walk Between Raindrops at the end, which is a wonderful song, but it's way too short. So it's like, but you have Peg, famously Rick Moratta on drums, doing this kind of very steady, very. It's nuanced because there's out of the. So you have the opening, the kind of horn thing, or the lyricon, or whatever it is, and then you have the song proper, and then when it does the recapitulation of the da 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 da, it slows down this much, and there's no, and they apparently, because I read there was no click, so Rick Moratta was so good that he could change tempi by like what 2, 3, 5, maybe 5 BPM,
right,
and he's holding it down because that groove is.
Oh yeah, that groove is unimpeachable.
That snare is on constantly, and then it's a nuance. Like he's doing all these weird things with the cymbal and the.
Well, I was gonna say the stuff he did with his hi hat was just off the charts. I mean, like, you know, it drives the song, and if it's not there, you'd miss it, right? Like you don't really focus on it unless you know it's there. Did you ever hear the take they did with Gadd?
I did. I was gonna bring that up because I couldn't remember.
Totally different song. Totally different groove.
And it's not bad.
No,
it's great, but the feel.
It's similar. That's the funny thing is it's similar, but it's so different.
Yes,
because it's not what Moratta played. Like it's just hard to describe.
For sure, like another band would take that Gadd take and be like, it's perfect. And in many reasons, and in many cases, they would be right if it was a different band. But Fagen and Becker, neither classically or jazz trained. Officially, Becker got some blues guitar lessons. Fagen a little more kind of classical training. Or formal training rather, but like those dudes just listened to records and had great ears and great feel and great intuition. I think they're one of the most intuitive bands. Yeah. And I think like I'm gonna end up, if we have time, we might have to. This might be a 2-parter, frankly, because we're spending. And I'm planning on doing an Asia podcast. I'm trying to hold things back.
Well, why don't we stop here? I think we said enough about Asia. We could move on because let's not ruin your episode and
time because we're already an hour in.
We're a half hour.
It's one of those things. It's a great album. Sounds great. Playing's great. Songwriting's great. It just checks all these boxes. And at the end of the day, they're just 7 wonderful pop jazz tunes that have heart, just like feels, as the kids would say, or pathos or
vibes.
Anyway,
it's one of the best albums.
I'm doing the podcast at some point, and, I'm having so let me.
It's one of the best albums ever made. Full stop. That's it. Like there's nothing else to say. Yeah.
Yes. When I see lists and it's like best audiophile albums for the 70s, I saw one today, and I didn't see Like Asia wasn't on it. I'm like, this is bullshit. It had like Rumors, which is great.
Yeah.
And it had like Led Zeppelin 4, which is a fine album, but it's not like an audiophile album. Is it?
I'm trying to think.
Like it sounds good, but it's not.
I don't know if it's the same caliber as like in Asia, but it's the recording is.
It's good.
You know what it is there's a lot of innovation happening. Like we could talk about Zeppelin a different day, but like Jimmy Page, was almost like a Fagin where he was so involved in the recording and the mixing and the engineering. Like he was very specific about how he wanted things laid down. It's not Zeppelin 4, but what's the song? Achilles' Last Stand has like 150 guitar overdubs or something crazy like that on it. It might not be that many. It might be less, but
whole Physical Graffiti.
Yeah,
it's one of the later ones.
Yeah, I forget.
It's not In Through the Outdoor.
No, it's not In Through the Outdoor. It's either Houses. I forget what album it's on, but like that kind of stuff. Like he did like all these weird like reverse tape loop echoes on songs, and like he did a lot of pioneering in some of the ways that stuff was recorded. So
sure,
I can see them putting that Zeppelin on that list, even though it's not what we would consider audiophile quality.
Cool.
So what's your first other album?
So I didn't get to this when you mentioned it because I just wanted to talk about Asia because I have a problem. But you said you're not traditionally an album guy.
No, not really. So your albums, and I'm not going to spoil them. I'll let you tee them up. But like, a couple of your albums, I know a bunch of songs off them, but there's songs that I've never heard. And I went and listened to most of what I could, get in before we recorded. And, I'm going to have to go back and revisit that decision.
So I have always been an album guy. Ever since and this first album we're going to talk about is the first album I fell in love with from the first band I fell in love with, who, because their past 20 years have not been great, I have not been a fan of. But something about the album as an experience has always interested me, especially when I was younger. And actually, Pink Floyd does not make the top 5; it makes top 10. But I would listen to Dark Side front to back constantly. Animals, which is my favorite Pink Floyd album, front to back constantly. And the whole concept album kind of sphere, I think, interested me.
There's certain albums to me that are albums and I have to listen to the whole thing, or I love to listen to the whole thing, and I know every song, every note, but it just, I do that with very specific artists or albums that I've, known and loved for different reasons. But just, especially in the age of Spotify, it's hard for me to sit and focus for an hour and listen to a whole album back to front.
For sure. That's part of the reason I got back into listening to my record collection, because there's something about the process of taking it out, cleaning it, putting it on the platter, putting the nib, listening, flipping, anyway.
It's intentional, yeah.
The intention behind it, I am a fan of. So the first record I ever fell in love with, I was 9 or 10 when I received it, which means that would have been 2004 or 5, is Green Day's Dookie.
Okay.
1994, I believe, Green Day's Dookie. I knew the hits going into this, Longview, Welcome to Paradise, Basket Case, etc., which was predicated me getting it for a Christmas or birthday gift, and I just fell in love with it. It's pop punk. It's all these albums except for one I consider pop albums on some level, and I think that helps the ease of listening experience because they are just catchy, upbeat tunes. So this is Green Day's, depending on how you think about it, second or third album. First album on a major label. Prior to that, they were on Reprise. They were, East Bay punk band formed in '89. Trio of bratty kids playing Lookout style East Bay punk, or the Mr. T Experience, or those kind of groups. Right. Ended up doing a bunch of EPs that were then. This is why I say second or third full album, that were then compiled into 1039 Smoothed Out Slappy Hours. And then they did Kerplunk, which has the first version of Welcome to Paradise, the original. And then they got signed to a major label, and they hooked up with Rob Cavallo, who was I'm not sure other albums he's worked on, but he was like a real producer. Yeah. And they are a mainstream producer. And they came out with Dookie. From the get-go, this cover art, a big...
Yeah, I love the cover
cartoon.
of that.
There's monkeys throwing poop. There's a dog driving a plane that's dropping poop bombs. There's some Ozzy Osbourne looking guy on right here, or maybe not Ozzy, but the kind of witch thing from the first Sabbath album is there. On the back cover if the original presses of, I'm not sure if they were CDs or vinyl, because this was 94, so I'm not sure if it was CDs or vinyl.
I bought the CD, yeah.
The original pressing, where it looks all black in the middle, there was a Elmo or an Ernie, like plush, like a big plush that these kids were throwing around, and then it came out like that, and then, you know, the Jim Henson Company was like, no, not on this album that's has songs about self-pleasure, to say the least, has songs about mental hospitals, has songs about Coming Clean is about Billy Joe, the singer and lead songwriter and guitarist, coming out about being bisexual, which 1994 as a male,
yeah, that was
pretty
a big
gutsy.
thing. Yeah.
I don't know. It's how many tracks? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. So it's 14 tracks, but it only clocks in at about 40 minutes because they're you know, it's very Ramones influence in terms of, you know, chainsaw fast, razor fast, quick pug songs. But it's
melodic. A lot of their songs are, you know, and that's what I think I appreciated about that album when it came out. I was 22. I probably saw the video. I was very into MTV. You know, that was sort of the end of MTV by that point. But, you know, they stopped playing videos and stuff. But like when the video came out for Longview, I just remember seeing Billy Joe Armstrong and just how he stood, how he slung his guitar really low, and he had like that Johnny Rotten sneer.
Yeah.
And it was like an affectation looking back on it. But at the time I was like, like these guys are kind of channeling the 70s punk shit that I listened to growing up, like the Sex Pistols and the Ramones and the Dead Kennedys. Like they had that kind of vibe, and I liked it. You know, I really liked that album.
I love it. I think people will say Nimrod's their best. Nimrod was 2 albums after this. It's longer. There's more. Some of the songs. There's what is King for a Day is like a ska tune. So there's a horn section. That's the one that has Time of Your Life on it. Which is, you know, the big. But I don't know. These are 14 tight tracks. Just about, you know, the first track is Burnout. It's about once again. It's the same like Steely Dan thing. It's a 20-year-old or however they were probably 20 when they recorded Green Day. Just like already being sick of everything and being jaded and being right. and I probably shouldn't have listened to this album when I was 10 because that probably set my life up in for disappointment. But no, it's just, you know, the big tracks, Longview, Welcome to Paradise, Basket Case, She, When I Come Around. But then, like I said, the deep cuts, Burnout, Having a Blast, Chump, which is about a loser. But the end is a big kind of drum and bass, just kind of extended jam that then there's no space between the tracks. It leads right into Longview. So it's kind of, that was my first introduction to like one track beating into the other.
Yeah.
Once again, the second recording of Welcome to Paradise, the first one being on Kerplunk from 92 or 93. And it's just better in every way. I mean, it's produced better. Mike Dirnt gets to show a lot more of his bass kind of prowess.
Oh, yeah.
Because he's a great bass player. And
he's a great
all
bass
these
player.
Albums, except the jazz, well, the jazz one is a kind of a different story. Just all great bass playing, all great rhythm like it's all just tight rhythm sections, which looking back, I don't think I appreciate as much as I do now. You know, Asia being the benchmark for a tight rhythm section. But so, but Trey Cool and Mike Dirnt on this thing are just holding it down. And it's groovy and it just goes, and it's not, you know, it's sneery, it is punk sneery, but it's to me Green Day is more, at least this era Green Day is more legitimate and down to earth and real, like realer than like a Sex Pistols, which were manufactured by some clothing store guy, you know, famously, and they had a great bass player and then they fired him for some heroin addict who ended up killing himself and his girlfriend.
Right.
I mean, through, you know, exposure to, you know, heroin. But this is more, it's, you know, it's bratty kids being upset, but the songwriting is intelligent. The hooks are catchy.
Oh yeah.
The background, the Billy Joe's lead vocals and Mike Dirnt doing all like the high harmony. It's very.
I was gonna say the harmonies are fantastic. Yeah.
It's what do they call it? It's a music theory term where oblique motion, where one voice, in this case literally a voice, but it could be an instrument, stays on one pitch, and then another one either above or below, and that's Mike Dirnt is just rock. You know, he's like Michael Anthony for Van Halen. He's just rock solid, and Billy Joe gets to do his thing, and then Mike Dirr will move down with the chord, and then Billy, it's
well executed. Great. It's
tight,
yeah,
without being clinical, and
right.
I think the thing that kills punk rock, and I'm not saying it has to sound crappy, but you can never have the Asia of punk rock, and that's okay. Like, that's not the point, but it's a clean album. It's a great, because of Green Day, I got into bands like The Descendants, The Adolescents, Dead Kennedys, Black Flag, Ramones. Like, I heard of Green Day before I heard of the Ramones, and I read an interview. Billy Joe's like, yeah, listen to those first couple Ramones albums. And then, in real life today, is it over here? Today it just came in the mail. I got the 33 and 3rd Ramones.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's one of those albums that just...
Is it on the first album, the book?
Yes.
Okay.
I like Leave Home. As far as Ramones go, I like the second one, Leave Home. It's a little poppier, and it's the songs I think are a little stronger, and it's mixed better. On the first Ramones album, the original mix, the guitar is in one channel and the bass is in another channel.
Yeah.
And then so Spotify has a billion versions of the first Ramones album, and it's like the 40th anniversary mix that fixes that and makes it not gross.
Yeah.
Because anyway. But before we move on to you, I love inserts in records.
Yes, me too.
Lyric sheets, and it kind of continues that whole vibe of kind of the comic book art, nice handwritten lyrics.
I feel like that was in the CD too. I remember that.
It was for a while when I was a kid before my basement flooded and I lost. Like, I had a first pressing of Fresh Fruit for Rotting Vegetables, gone.
Ooh.
With the poster in it, gone. I had color vinyl of Slayer's first album, gone. I've since learned to keep my records up. Anyway,
high and dry. Yeah.
But no, I had a bunch of I had all the Green Day's albums for a while, and this was in it. But just like, come on, these are kids. Just living life, and they got lucky with a record deal, and turns out they're, I think, fantastic musicians, especially that rhythm section. Billy Joe just writes some really, still to me, relatable lyrics. Since before I was that age.
Yeah.
Since I was 8 years before that age, and now I'm 9 years past that age. And it's a great album, but to me, it's more important because of what it represented in terms of broadening my musical horizons, getting into punk, which then led me into bands like the Smiths and Joy Division, and I had a phase of, and we'll get to this with your artists, I had a phase of like Sonic Youth and the Pixies and Dinosaur Jr. and REM, bands that I would love to revisit. I just don't have the time of the day. So they were just an important band for broadening, because before that it was Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, Van Halen, great bands, but like this.
Yeah, there's so much more out there.
This has more to do with what it means to me than a listening experience, even though I still contend it's a wonderful album. 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10. Like, it's for what it set out to do, it accomplished flawlessly.
Yes, agreed. And it spoke to me, who was pretty much the same age as those guys ish when that came out, because it really hits on that like Gen X slacker.
Yes.
Like
MTV generation. Or coming in, like very Beavis and Butthead. Longview is Longview's all about, wasting a day, getting high.
They talk about it on one of the episodes, Beavis and Butthead, I think. Yeah, they actually, and I forget what the verdict was. I'm sure they said, "Oh, this sucks," but whatever.
So what of your albums are you going to talk about first? Because I have notes.
I don't have any cool show and tell props because I don't have any of my favorite albums on vinyl except for the ones I've just started collecting this year.
Yes, but you own a house, so like
I do. Yeah, right. Exactly.
And I have a family. I have cats, and
that's nowhere near as cool as a vinyl collection, by the way. Nowhere near. This doesn't come close.
I hope she doesn't watch this.
Well, no, my wife and my daughter are cool, but the house and
okay,
no,
mortgage,
fuck all.
nah.
Yeah, not fun. But I do have all my CDs. I just didn't have time to go in the crawl space and get all dirty trying to find them. And they're in a. I have all the CD, like those, the books that you flip through.
Yeah.
I put everything into those years ago, and they're just in a box someplace in my crawl space. So I got to get them out one day because I think it'll be fun to go through and find the stuff that I forgot I have. Sure. So anyway, without the visual aids, one of the albums I wanted to talk about today was the debut by Lloyd and the Commotions, and the name of the album is Rattlesnakes from 1984. I got into Lloyd Cole late. I didn't know who he was, never heard the Commotions. They weren't real big in the U.S. In fact, I don't think they really charted or had any success here, or almost,
Before
none.
You told me about them,
yeah,
never heard. Never heard of them.
Yeah, I think they're fairly obscure here. In the UK, they were pretty big. You know, they were on Top of the Pops, and I think they had some charting singles, and their albums were always played and stuff like that. But yeah, I think here they were largely overlooked, which is a damn shame because it's some of the best songwriting. They only put out 3 albums, right? So they were around from 84 to 89. I first got introduced to them, I think it was the summer of 1990, I want to say. It might have been 91, but one of those 2 years. And I grew up in Atlantic City down in South Jersey. And I had a bunch of friends that had, come over from Ireland for the summer. So they had like this whole great different set of artists and music that they were into that I, things I'd never heard of. So my one friend Donal got me into Lloyd Cole, got me into Prefab Sprout, got me into the Laws, got me into Kirsty MacColl, got me, Suzanne Vega is an American artist, obviously, but like I wasn't really a big fan of her because, that song Luca was like great song. Love it now, but like at the time it was kind of like, okay, my name is Luca, wasn't a big fan of it when it was a current song. But he turned me on to her earlier stuff before that. And I was just like, wow, how did I miss all this? Right. So Lloyd Cole and the Commotions, I think he had the cassette of their greatest hits album, which is just called 84 to 89. And it's got all the hits plus a re-recorded version of a song and a couple of B-sides or unreleased tracks or whatever. So he lent me a copy. Of course, I made myself a dub of it so I could listen to it. And it just blew me away. Like from the opening track, I hadn't heard anything like this before. From a musical perspective, jangly guitars. First album's a little bit sparse. If you listen to their second and third albums, they get a little more developed in terms of instrumentation and composition. But not to say that there's anything missing from the first album. It's just brilliant. It's Lloyd is one of my favorite songwriters because he's so literate and he paints pictures with words, right? And a lot of songwriters do that, but especially him to me.
For sure. So I like I said, first time ever heard of Lloyd Cole. I gave this a listen once or twice. Immediately, looking at my notes, the first thing I wrote was Higher Fidelity Velvet Underground.
Yes.
It's that kind of proto art rock thing that the Velvets did. Very interesting lyrics, but they with higher production value. To me, this album and the rest of yours are very college rock, if not directly, if not direct. Yeah. It's like Steely Dan. Is Steely Dan yacht rock? Yes, no. Maybe they're not. Maybe Lloyd Cole isn't college rock, but it's so the jangly guitars, the kind of tight songwriting is to me very early REM, very Dinosaur Jr., very Pixies, very Sonic Youth, very all this. And sonically, it doesn't sound maybe the same, but it just exists in that world. I also find a lot of similarity with Lloyd Cole and the Smiths in terms of the jangly guitar sound, the lyrics about life. While Lloyd Cole is more put together and less emotional than Morrissey, so that's a good thing. I was just really interested in the sound. What I really like, because you hear plenty of bands with jangly guitars and songs about, or literate songs or songs about life. There's that organ throughout the whole thing.
Yes.
Is that a Wurlitzer or what is that?
Wurlitzer, Hammond, I'm not sure which, but it's, it makes some of the songs. Yeah, it's very unique.
Because bands that sound like this don't have organs.
Right.
They maybe will have a trumpet on a track, but do not have organs. And I looked it up, and apparently Lloyd Cole was influenced by Bob Dylan, which you get a lot through the lyrics and kind of the delivery, and Booker T and the MGs. And that's the organ. That is green earrings. It's just it's green earrings with aggression.
He was into the soul stuff. I think he was really into R&B and that sort of stuff. I think he lists those types of bands as influences. So yeah, that makes total sense. And he was friends with Morrissey. They actually hung out and
really,
So
timeline makes sense because '84 was the first Smith album.
Right. I think they were basically doing that circuit with Top of the Pops and all the British TV shows that had all the artists on them at that time. I think they were sort of in that same circle, but Lloyd's still around. He's been making, so when the Commotions broke up, he started doing solo albums, which he's been putting out an album every few years since like 1990. And
Really?
they're pretty much all great. Like the first 3 or 4 are just fabulous. And then, he got a little more experimental, I think, and tried to branch out and do new things, but he's still recording and he's still playing. In fact, he's touring. I'm not sure where he is right now. I think he's in Europe somewhere, but the funny thing is, a couple years ago during the pandemic, he started a Patreon because he was like, shit, I can't tour right now and I'm losing money and, whatever. And I want to stay in front of my fans. So he started the Patreon, and apparently he took like very meticulous notes while writing things with the Commotions and then later on in his solo career, but also kept a lot of notes about like what was going on with the band. So like tour dates and, who owed him money and, receipts for like a shirt that he bought that the record company paid him back for because he wore it on TV. Like, shit like that, right? Like just this little effluvia of his life. But it's so interesting, especially when you're invested in an artist the way that I am with Lloyd and, the Commotions and his solo work. At a point. Oh, so the point is, he actually scanned a letter that Morrissey wrote him, and it was like, it was like, "Hey Lloyd, how's it going? Sorry I missed you, and whatever, whatever it might have been." But it was just like they were like pen pals and shit when they weren't, hanging out in person. So it's kind of cool. And I've seen him play how many times now? I think twice. Yeah, I saw him once in the '90s, and then I saw him solo right before the pandemic. It was like the fall of 2019. He was actually playing a little music venue in Jersey it's a church, but they use it for music, I guess, at least on weekends. Yeah, it was great. And it was just him and a guitar, and it was like fucking amazing.
Yeah.
It was like 5 pews back from the stage.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I made a note here that, and like I said, I have not had time to sit down with even though it's such a short discography, but I am intrigued. I made a note here. If I heard Lloyd Cole before I heard the Smiths, I might be a bigger Lloyd Cole fan, or I might have been. Like it's because it fills a lot of things that Mara and Morrissey wrote and did musically. There's similarity in Lloyd Cole. I think Lloyd Cole's a little rougher around the edges. It's kind of that more college rock kind of REM sound, which I love. But the Wurlitzer, it's songs about, at least from what I could glean, a lot of these songs are about failed or problematic relationships. Which is...
Well, isn't the best music about that?
Black Cow. Or great songs are about great relationships. I got the news. Anyway, but I did write down one lyric that stuck with me, and I didn't note what song it is, and you'll know. Do you want to go to heaven, or would you rather not be saved?
Oh, God, what song
I think it's on one of the middle tracks.
I feel like it's one of the later tracks. Now I got to find out because that doesn't... I know the lyric, but I can't tell you what song it's from.
Real quick.
Yeah, okay, go ahead. So while you're doing that, let me just also make a recommendation. Listen to the second album by the Commotions, Easy Pieces, and their last album, which is called Mainstream, which is kind of funny. Like they were smart asses too. They were like, Lloyd's very sort of cynical and sarcastic, which maybe I'm just drawn to that kind of music. Fuck, I don't know. But they get away from the jangle, and they like I said, they build the compositions and the instrumentation. So like, they're more organs, there's string sections that are a little bit deeper. There's horns on the opening track of the second album. There's horns on other songs too, but like it's one of my favorite horn pieces of theirs. So definitely dig deeper because they get, I don't want to say they get better, but they get more fully realized. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I do, I appreciate some extra production, and we'll get to that with one of these albums very much in particular. I like extra horns and strings and just extra, I mean, I love punk rock and I love simplicity, but there's something to be said about fine production and just adding more material to a song because you can do it and it sounds good and it sounds natural and it doesn't sound forced. And I would like that because I love his base level of songwriting, and their playing I think is phenomenal. So just more of that with some extra symphonic elements I think would be up my alley. The song it's So You'd Like to Save the World.
That's not on Rattlesnakes.
Then what was I listening to? No, sorry. Charlotte Street.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I was looking at YouTube because he has a song. So you'd like to say, okay, sorry, Charlotte Street.
Yes, Charlotte Street, yes.
And I was listening to that and I was like, oh, and I had to like go back. I'm like, I like how direct it is, but it could also be interpreted so many ways.
My favorite lyric of his, I think of all time, if not just on that album, is in the song, Four Flights Up, and the lyric is, "Must you tell me all your secrets when it's hard enough to love you knowing nothing?"
Yes.
Like,
That
shit, like, ow, that just hurts.
Yeah, like reading the lyrics, and I was kind of listening to it sporadically, so sometimes I'd have the lyrics up. But I was amazed with he's writing things. He's writing about things that I felt, but puts it in such a succinct way without being pedantic.
Yeah,
Like, do you want to go to heaven, or would you rather not be saved? It's like that's kind of a normal sentiment, but it rolls off the tongue. It makes you think, but it also makes you feel immediately. It's like a Steely Dan. Like, you can listen to some of those lyrics and kind of get it. Some of the songs are cryptic as hell, but like a Midnight Cruiser, you can kind of get like the vibe of it, and then you like think about it, and like, oh, he said felonious. Who does he mean? And now is there a jazz thing, or like a Parker's band? It's like, oh, it's about Charlie Parker, and then like, it's like, I wonder what being bareback on an armadillo means, and you realize Charlie Parker just rode a horse down the street of New York because he was Charlie Parker, and he could.
Well, Steely Dan and Lloyd Cole have one big thing in common for me, and this is before the internet, mind you, like they made me want to learn more about the references, because there are so many references to films and books.
Yes.
and everything else, right? So, Charlie Parker, did I know who Charlie Parker was when I was a kid listening to Steely Dan? No. Did I know, where Rudy's was? Like, there's so many elements of Steely Dan songs that, like, it's lore to many, but there are real places and people and books and movies and things like that, right? And even if they're not explicit, like Sign-In Stranger was inspired by some sci-fi book, right? And I forget the name of it now, but like, I'm going to go read that at some point, because it's, I want to read what Fagin read, right? And same thing with Lloyd Cole, like, same song, Four Flights Up. It's, you came, I forget the full lyric, but it's like, you came something into town in a beat up Grace Kelly car. Like, I knew who Grace Kelly was, but what do you mean beat up Grace Kelly car? And I looked it up, and like, whatever car she had, like,
Yeah.
It's so funny to me that like a lot of my cultural education comes from music, because I've, what the hell's Kirschwasser, right? And I didn't know that until years later. What's a piaster? I asked my sister that, I think, when I was a teenager listening to Katie Light. I'm like, do you know what a piaster is? And she like, yeah, it's Dutch money. And I'm like, huh. Yeah. But he's in Miami, and she's like, I know.
It speaks something of a great artist, where the little daily occurrences and observations that us mortals just kind of, okay, oh, that's, that colored car, or that happened. And then it's a great artist that can kind of take these basic or forgettable observations and kind of tie that or turn that into something significant lyrically or meaning wise. And Fagin Becker did that. Apparently Lloyd Cole has done that. Morrissey kind of did that on some level.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, never heard of them. I also find it interesting that two of your choices, and I think you're talking about 4 albums, Asia being one, I'm talking about 5. 2 of yours are British.
Yeah.
And, I'm not saying you have to like American music or Brit, but I just think that's interesting that, like, 'cause all mine are American. I mean, Fagin and Becker are aliens, but they were born in New York, New Jersey, so they count. But I only have one British band, and you have 2. And the aesthetics between your 2 choices and my British choice, from the same time frame, very similar. It's like 2 sides of the same aesthetic. I found that interesting when I was looking up these artists and learning and listening. There's probably something there. But that would mean a deep dive of so many different groups' catalogs and a study of mid-1980s British culture and just a lot. But awesome album. I recommend it. It will be on my short list to revisit for sure.
Nice. Well, why don't we do one more of yours, and then that'll put us probably closer to an hour and a half, and then I think we can maybe hit pause and come back for part 2 and finish up the rest. Cool. What do you think?
That sounds great.
All right.
So the first album I fell in love with was Green Day's Dookie. In the interim, a couple Van Halen records, a couple Pink Floyd records, but an album, and then a couple punk albums, those first couple Descendants albums, that the Adolescence Blue album, all the things. But an album I listened to, or a band I first discovered when I was about 15 or 16, so that would have been early mid-high school, band I never heard of, album I never heard of, and then one of my friends turned me onto it. The band is the Smiths. The album, 1986 is, I believe, The Queen is Dead. Just got this in the mail this morning. I overnight shipped this from Amazon so I would have a prop. And I also wanted it on vinyl. Awesome gatefold. Love lyrics. Love seeing a picture of the band. And then because I'm out of like those anti-static sleeves, so I have to order some more. My record's still in the thing. I'm not happy about that, but just weird kind of insert sleeve that just has, who did what on, or who plays what, and who engineered whatever. But The Queen is Dead is, I believe, 10 tracks.
Who produced that? Does it say who the producer is?
Yeah. Well, Morrissey and Marr, but it's engineered by Stephen Street.
Stephen Street. Okay. I feel like Stephen Street worked on the Commotion stuff too, I want to say. I might be wrong on that, but I feel like
I have Rattlesnakes pulled up here. Not on this album, but Rick Ocasek did some mixing. Who was what? He was the Cars guy, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That first album by the Cars is great.
Oh yeah.
But The Queen is Dead is the third of 4 Smith studio albums. 86. What I find interesting about the Smiths as a band, it isn't really the lyrical content. It's just, Morrissey's some moody 20-something who just hates going outside, and he likes flowers and riding his bicycle. And Johnny Marr is this guitar god who would just write the jangliest, most intricate guitar parts, and then backed by, once again, a super tight rhythm section of Andy Rourke on bass, who just passed away, and Mike Joyce on drums. So you kind of have this tight rhythm section that lets Marr and Morrissey kind of do their thing. What I find interesting about the Smiths is that makes them different from an American band at the time. In the 70s, I think there's this prevalence with AOR, album-oriented rock, that was very much an American thing, but Led Zeppelin also added to that, so did Pink Floyd. But from what I'm aware of in the 80s, like the 70s and mid 80s, in England, it was very much a singles game still.
Yeah.
So listening to the Smiths is weird because they have 4 studio albums, which should be like, okay, they have 4, but there's so many singles and B-sides that made it onto like compilations. Most famously Half Full of Hollow, which came out in between the first and second Smiths album. And then there's like a British only compilation, and which is, what is it? The World Won't Listen. And then there's the American Louder Than Bombs, or vice versa. And they're kind of the same, except they're kind of different. So, and then there's all these hiatus. So the Smiths, it's like you can listen to those 4 albums, but they're still like you're missing half the catalog, and it's not a huge catalog. But The Queen is Dead, I think it's just 10 tracks, 10 awesome tracks. Stand out.
So why is it your favorite out of the Smiths albums?
Well, the first one, the Smiths, which was 1980. I guess that would have been 4. It has first album syndrome. Playing's not super tight. Some of the songs aren't the best. Meat as a Murder, I like. That's 85. It's strong. It's some people's favorite. What for me, it's still lacking. Some of the songwriting I think is lacking. Like they have great ideas, but the songs don't deliver. You have like Rush Home Ruffians, which I think is quite good, and then you have the Headmaster Ritual. But then you get to the end of the album, and side B just kind of, it just gets tired.
Yeah.
Like the sound is great, the playing is great, but there's not really variety. And then the one song that has variety on the album is the last song, Meat is Murder, which is a fine song, but it's all about Morrissey's veganism, which I'm not anti, like I don't, whatever. But it's like you're listening to an album and then you just hear like saws and like animals screaming. And which I don't think is real, actual slaughterhouse audio. I think it's like studio because it sounds fake. And then he's just kind of crying, and it's like I get it, dude. I love animals. I sometimes consider, being vegetarian or vegan because I feel guilty, but at the same time, like.
Hey, a lot of the bands in that time had to make some kind of political statement or some societal statement, right? I don't fault him for that.
No, and
I just
be mad, but because they were dealing with Thatcher and we were dealing with Reagan. Like, what's the who's worse?
Right. Yeah. I'll tell you one thing. I came to the Smiths really late relatively in life. I hated the Smiths in high school when they were out.
Understandable.
Well, I was into hip hop and punk and heavy metal, and I didn't even like stuff like Zeppelin and Van Halen and stuff till I was a little bit older. It was kind of, and that was, I liked 1984, right? Because that was like the pop Van Halen album, if you will. But and I think this is kind of a funny story, but there were these two guys that I went to school with, and they were like obsessed, and I mean obsessed with the Smiths, like posters in their rooms, bought every album, bought all the fanzines. All they would talk about was the only band they would listen to. Like, it was their whole identity, these two. And I didn't like either one of those guys. Like, I had a couple classes with a few of them, and one kid was in a bunch of my classes in high school, and I couldn't stand him. Yeah. And I feel bad because, like, we were friends, but more like frenemies kind of thing. I don't know. Anyway, all that to say is, because of that, it kind of turned me off. And even though I was into the harder stuff, I was still into the more sensitive stuff. Like, I played the Violent Femmes on repeat, although Violent Femmes were like punk
adjacent.
Yeah, no, they were punk. I'm sorry. I don't care what anybody says.
Okay.
They were punk bands. They were just an acoustic punk band, right? So, like, I was into other things in that genre, but I just, for some reason, couldn't get my head around the Smiths. And I think it was because I just had such a bad taste in my mouth for the people that were obsessed with them. So fast forward until, college and right after. And then I forgot how I turned back around and got into them. Oh, I know. In college, there was a song that came out, I think it was 1990, by a band called Soho, one hit wonder. The song was called Hippie Chick.
Okay.
Have you ever heard the song?
I've heard the name. I'm not sure.
So it samples the guitar riff from How Soon Is Now.
Oh, that's, yeah.
And I remember playing it like on repeat. I think I even had that, and hear a funny tape thing. I had a single.
Oh, there we go. Single. Let's go.
I know for 1,000%, I know I had the single for Hippie Chick, and I played it over and over and over again. And this guy, Glenn, who lived on my dorm hall, he liked the song too. And I was just like, yeah, that guitar part. I don't know how they came up with that guitar part. And he goes, they didn't come up with that. He goes, that's the Smiths. And I'm like, no. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, damn it, I hate the Smiths. And he's like, why do you hate the Smiths? And I'm like, long story, blah, 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 blah. So anyway, he had a couple Smiths albums, lent me the tapes or the CDs or whatever he had. And I was like, all right, time to get over my high school bullshit and just, give them a fair shake. So I did. And been a fan ever since. Yeah. Right. So
for sure. But you get to, speaking of why this is my favorite. So, first album is first album. Meet His Murder is in the right direction, but it lacks variety. And then you get to Meet His Murder, and the playing's off the chart. It's the tightest rhythm section on any of the albums. It's Johnny Marr's most creative guitar part, or guitar parts. Morrissey's lyrics are, they're whiny because that's Morrissey, but they're not like crybaby. Like his song "I Know It's Over," which is just about like a breakup and knowing it's over, which I think we've all felt. Like, you get to the twilight of a relationship and you're just kind of, someone's got to do something about this. But it's not like whiny or crybaby. It's honest. There's a lot of honesty on this album. Like Cemetery Gates, British. It's this jangly, upbeat song about hating the sun, so you're going to hang out in a cemetery. But he's not being, because Morrissey is obviously a very contentious person. I think he's a bad person. I don't think he's a monster, but I think he's a bad person.
Yeah, agreed.
And I almost bought tickets to go see him once, and I'm like, he's gonna end up saying some nonsense about someone's race that is just not cool. Yeah. Or he's gonna cancel the show because they're selling hot dogs. Like, I'm just not dealing. I don't buy ticket insurance. I go to my job every day. I assume a professional goes to their job every day. Even rock stars, if they're hungover, you deal with it. You drink that water. But no, I don't have time for Morrissey's nonsense. But something like a Cemetery Gates is not contrarian. It's just, I'm moody.
Right.
And that's who I am.
I'm a sad bastard. Yeah.
Yes. Big Mouth Strikes Again, which is my favorite Smith song and my favorite on the album. That song, well, The Queen is Dead, the opening, because it has that kind of show tune beginning, is really produced. Great drum part, great kind of guitar overdubs. Big Mouth Strikes Again is catchy. The bass, Andy Rourke's bass, and Mike Joyce's drums, the pocket on that. But then there's the line "a crack on the head," and there's the production choice of having a whip or a slapstick, and it's those little choices. Some girls are bigger than others. A song about how people come in all shapes and sizes, and apparently that bothers Morrissey because he's an asshole. And I don't know about you, Chad, but we respect our thick queens.
Hell yeah, we do. Are you kidding me?
I respect any woman who wants to talk to me. I literally have a Steely Dan podcast. So, yeah, no, doesn't happen often. But no, some girls are bigger than others, which is a song about some women being fat, which is, but it's so good. It's so catchy. Anyway, but the fact, like, it starts out with the groove and it fades out and fades back in. And why? Does it have anything musically to do with the song? Is it like one of those artistic choices? No. It was just a production choice. And there's a lot of thinking on this album in terms of the production and the sound. And then after this, so I think it's their perfect encapsulation of the Smiths aesthetic. Morrissey's not too whiny. Johnny Marcus the shine, and the rhythm section is just tight.
The rhythm section's amazing. The bass playing in the Smiths in general, like you said, is once I started to really listen to them for some of the instrumentation, like the bass lines are just unreal. My favorite track on this album, might be the obvious one, but I love "There's a Light That Never Goes Out." I've always loved that song.
Wonderful song. So right before I got into the Smiths, I was listening to a lot of hardcore. There was like a local hardcore scene. Because I was into punk, but there was no punk scene, but there's like a hardcore scene, just 16-year-old kids playing at churches. And I got hit in the face a couple times when I was two-stepping. And I forget who, but one of those hardcore adjacent bands, not one of the local ones, but one of the bigger ones, did an acoustic cover of "There's a Light That Never Goes Out." It's a male and a female, and they're duetting it, and it's beautiful. And then right after I heard that, I'm like, oh, it's a great tune. And then I ended up getting into the Smiths, and then I was listening to them. I'm like, oh, I've heard this. It's, it's the Smiths. Like, I think they're just a great tight band. Morrissey gets memed on for obvious reasons. Johnny Morris, God, and it's a tight rhythm section. I will say this. Their next album, the only reason I'm mentioning it is because there's only 4 to talk about, right? Strange Ways, Here We Come, which they broke up before they finished it. So it's not as produced as The Queen Is Dead, but I think that album is quite good too. I think a lot of the songs are good. It is their last album. So like the first and last album suffer from first and last album. Like every band has beginning album, growing pains, peak, decline. They did all that in 4 albums. First album, beginning album syndrome. Second album, Meet His Murder, growing pains. Third album, perfection. Fourth album, they didn't finish it, and
Lloyd Cole did it in 3. Lloyd Cole did it in 3.
Weird flex, but okay. But so how's that third Lloyd Cole album? Is it like a dying album, or is it okay?
No, it's real.
Tight.
It's tight. Just go listen to it. There's no way to describe it. It's tight. The songwriting is amazing. Is it the opening track? Yeah, I think it's the opening track. It's called "My Bag." It's probably one of my favorite Lloyd Cole and Commotion songs out of the 3 albums. Yeah, it's just a jam.
You do have to appreciate when a band goes out on a bang.
Yep.
Like a Van Halen, which one of their albums, and look, I'd probably have multiple albums from the same artist in the top 10, but I'm trying to like not. But Van Halen, at least I only consider the David Lee Roth era canon. Sorry, but like you start out with Van Halen 1, amazing. Maybe it could be considered their best. My favorite's actually Fair Warning because I have to be a weird contrarian. But then on the David Lee Roth run, they end with 1984. Like, and they were blowing up that entire album, but you can't tell. And then they got Sammy Hagar, and he ruined that band. And then they got Gary Cherone, and they came out with
Van Halen. He ruined it further.
And then they got David Lee Roth back and recorded that reunion album, which is okay.
That's awful. Look, I was a Van Hagar hater when it happened, even though I did like Sammy Hagar, but retconning that era, there's some great songs on those.
There's great
albums.
Songs, but there's not great albums.
Right.
Maybe exactly. Maybe 5150.
Yeah.
Maybe. Actually, funny enough, Hagar's going on tour. I don't know if you saw that.
Yes.
Yeah. With Michael Anthony's on bass, Satriani's on guitar, and then Bonham's kid. Actually, it's funny because in the summer, I'm seeing Doobie Brothers in Homedale, and I posted that on Facebook or whatever, and my dad's like, he texted me. He's like, I'm seeing Sammy Hagar there. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And he actually came to visit today, and we were talking about that. And I'm like, do you think he's going to do like Van Hagar songs? And he's like, yeah.
Oh,
that's got to be half the set list. Like, Sammy Hagar's solo stuff is great. And what was that band he was in? Montrose?
Yeah, Montrose.
Yeah, they're cool. But like, come on. Dreams, like they're not going to do Dreams. They're not going to do, you know, Pound Cake.
I just love that he's playing with Satriani, who I love. I saw him. I went to one of the G3 tours back in the 90s, and it just blew me away. It was the one with him, Steve Vai, and Eric Johnson.
Talent.
And it was just this little tiny venue in Pennsylvania somewhere. I forget where. But it was like in the realm kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't think of the name of the venue, but it was just small and intimate and just unreal.
That's awesome.
Yeah. All right, man. So why don't we stop here, and then we'll have to schedule part 2.
Awesome.
So you have what, 3 more albums to get through, and I have.
I'm sorry. As the kids say, I'm a yapper.
No, that's fine. I'm enjoying this, and I'm loving this format. So maybe I'll throw another album in the mix too, and that way
let's do that.
And
then we can do a part 2.
Yeah, cool. Sounds good.
Yeah, awesome. So which because like I said, I have notes on all your albums. So what's the next one for you?
I don't know. I got to think about it. I just came up with those 3 off the top of my head. So what did I do? I did Lloyd. We're doing Prefab Sprout. We're doing Buffalo Tom. I feel like I want to put a Smashing Pumpkins album in the mix because they are one of my favorite bands and one of my favorite album bands. One of the only bands that I've listened to albums.
So this is and please do Smashing Pumpkins because I need to listen to them. Hot Phil take. I don't like grunge.
They're not grunge. They're not grunge.
Aren't they adjacent? Is it one of those things? I'm like not. I'm not
Steely Dan,
aware.
Yacht Rock.
Yeah. Okay. So I like some of their songs. For me, and once again, like tell me an album to listen to, and I will dig in and. I'm
calling it now.
Okay.
Siamese Dream. Go listen to Siamese Dream. That'll be my album. Okay. You're a rock kid. You're a punk kid. You're an emo kid. Blend all those together, and you've got Siamese Dream.
Okay.
You'll dig it.
I'm sure I will because.
And you'll know half the songs because they were on the radio, and they were on the radio in the 90s. But you'll be familiar with at least 2 or 3 songs. But the non-album tracks are the ones. I mean, the non-hit single tracks were the ones that do it for me on that album. But the whole thing, just as a piece of music, is just one of my favorites. So
I like Billy Corgan. Not as a musician. I'm not anti-Billy. I'm unfamiliar. But Billy Corgan bought the National Wrestling Alliance a decade ago, and I'm a huge pro wrestling fan. And right before COVID, they had the NWA had a YouTube show. It was like an hour called NWA Power, and it was old school 70s studio style wrestling, and some ex-WWE guys that I grew up watching were on it, and it was like being transported back to another time because they'd have the interviews at the desk, and I was just like, is Ric Flair going to show up and go woo? And then COVID, it ended that. But I love watching his interviews about as a musician. And you would think, oh, Billy Corgan, I love Smashing Pumpkins, and he's the wrestling guy. For me, it's like, no, he owns NWA.
Yeah, well, he was such a huge fan, I think, and he's my age or maybe a few years older than me, but I mean, I think he came up watching WWF and, all the golden age of wrestling stuff. And I think he said that he was just disgusted by what it had become, and he bought it to try to just turn it around and make it, palatable again. And I think he's doing a good job.
For a few years, the NWA was awesome when he had it. They had this champion named Nick Aldis who was just your tip. I think he's English or Australian. He has one of those accents that I can't tell the difference of because I'm a dumb American. But, your typical wrestler, tall, chiseled, could talk, could smack talk, could go. And he had the belt forever. And it was really awesome watching him. And I was watching that Power program for a while. It was free. And then COVID happened. And then money. Yeah. And the NWA was struggling to begin with because it's not the WWE. And it kind of went away. But those couple years, those were just good times. And then I was forced to sit in my house for months.
Right.
and then I got really depressed because everyone did, because I couldn't see my friends.
Well, Corgan's another Morrissey figure. He's kind of an asshole.
Yeah.
Maybe not a don't think he's a racist or political pariah or whatever, but
he's a moody bastard.
He's also he's an asshole. There's no other way to say it. And people think that about him. And I I understand some of the artistic decisions that he was forced to make in the band before the, in the original incarnation of the band, because, they've gone through a few different lineups, and we can talk about that when we talk about the Siamese Dream album. But, I don't like the new stuff, and sometimes with an artist, I'm ride or die. Like, I'll listen to anything they do, and I'll, like most of it because I just do. But there's some artists where there's a point where I'm like, okay, you're done. Like, I can't, they went a whole different direction, or, whatever. And some of the Pumpkin stuff that's come out the last 10 years has been pretty decent. Okay. But for the most part, I haven't really been into it. But we'll cover all that next time. Yeah. All right, good.
So, all right, you said you're going to do one more album, though.
Yeah, Siamese Dream.
Oh, I thought you meant right now. Like you were gonna.
No.
Oh, I thought we were gonna do like an even, like a 3 and 3.
No, I think we can just because you still have 2 more, right?
2 more, yeah.
So how many more? That gives me 3 more. All right, let's do one more then. We're only at an hour 25. We can get through Prefab Sprout.
Okay.
All right, good. Let's do that one next. I'm going in chronological order on mine, by the way.
Yeah. 'Cause what's that? 85, and then Lloyd Cole's 84.
Yeah, Lloyd Cole was 84, Prefab Sprout's 85. So my other album is Prefab Sprout. So the American release that I was familiar with was called Two Wheels Good.
Because Steve McQueen sued, right?
Yes.
So the album is called Steve McQueen.
Yes.
The cover is just them. They're like on a motorcycle, but it's not Steve McQueen. There's no image. But he sued. Correct?
His estate sued them because they didn't.
At the time?
Yeah, he was dead at the time, but I think he sued them for just likeness rights for using the name or whatever. So when they re-released it or released it in the States, they had to change the name. So they called it Two Wheels Good. But since then, that's been resolved, or maybe record company paid off McQueen's estate or something.
I looked it up on Spotify and I just typed in Prefab Sprout Steve McQueen, and
yeah, it's there now. Yeah. So they changed the name back, I don't know, years ago. Another album that I think I mentioned this earlier that my friends from Ireland turned me on to. So Prefab Sprout is an Irish band. Okay. They got together. It's 2 brothers, Paddy McAloon and Martin McAloon. Wendy Smith is she plays keys and guitar and sings.
She sings on. She does like a duet on all these tracks, right?
And she's all over all their albums. She has like just this ethereal, angelic
beautiful
voice. And she does all these like really high harmonies and counter melodies and stuff, and she's amazing. And then Neil Conti, I'm not sure if he was the original drummer, but he's on all the albums. A fucking phenomenal drummer, by the way. Like, if you really listen to him, and Martin McAloon's a great bass player. Like, another
I love once again, I love the vibe, like the feel, the groove.
Yeah.
Oh, Otis. I do. That's not on my records. Otis.
He got excited. He heard groove, and he's like, "Yeah, man, groove."
Yeah, he's a slinky little thing, so he doesn't enjoy vibing out, as the kids say. Stop. And I took all my records out of the sleeves. Not
of course, he's walking on them.
Yeah. So like, just to have empty, an empty record, so I can in case. And so I have all them just stacked, and he is just sitting on my brand new 2LP 145 Stevie Wonder. I guess I spoiled one of the albums we're going to talk about. Thanks, dude. You better not scratch them. I literally cannot afford to spend money on records. I'm waiting for a check to come, and I had to do it for the show and tell. And
I appreciate the effort, man. That's great.
Well, I wanted them, and I'm like,
right.
I know I'm coming to some money.
Give me the excuse to buy it. Yeah.
Instead of waiting a week, when I get my check, I'll just not go out to dinner or something. Anyway, I also I ordered completely different those 2 fiction Steely Dan books. The name, and so I ordered them. What's the other, whatever the other one was called?
I forgot. Yeah,
but
they're great.
Yeah, you said they're great, so and they're not that expensive. I was just waiting to. Anyway, Prefab Sprout, Steve McQueen, or AKA, what did you say it was? The US,
Two Wheels Good. Yeah. So again, album that, and it wasn't even the first album that I was turned on to from Prefab Sprout. It was from Langley Park to Memphis, which was the next album, which is, I think, their third. So Steve McQueen was their second record. First one was Swoon, which was like a small, I think, indie release. Got a lot of critical acclaim, didn't really get a whole lot of commercial success. I don't think they kind of broke in the UK until Steve McQueen came out. But there was a song on Langley Park called Cars and Girls. And that was the first track I heard because my buddies from Ireland were obsessed with it, and they played it like all the time.
Okay.
And it's basically about Bruce Springsteen, right? So the chorus of that song goes, "Some things hurt much more than cars and girls." Right.
Yeah.
And they actually name check him. Like the opening line is Brucey Dreams, Life's a Highway.
So that's just their thing, is referencing people they like.
Or taking the piss out of, in this case, I think, right? So back to Steve McQueen, I kind of retroed into that album because I heard Langley Park to Memphis and just, fell in love with that band. So of course my buddy was like, okay, we'll go back and listen to the first two albums because, they're great also. So, but Steve McQueen has really just stuck with me as my favorite Sprouts album. I dare say his track 2, Bonnie, is one of my favorite songs ever of all time. Full stop across any. Yeah.
I liked it. I liked Appetite a lot actually on this. That might be my favorite. Or Horsing Around.
Yeah, I like Horsing Around too. I love Hallelujah.
Yes.
Another good one. And the whole album again is just fantastic.
I liked it. Song length variety, song structure variety, great songwriting. I wrote here as part of my notes, Smith's Jangle / country.
Yes,
because like Jangle could be country. You think of like Telecaster on like Hee Haw or whatever, but then say it can go like emo, sad boy, Smiths, or it can go country. And it's cool because you said they're Irish. So Ireland does have that great history of their native music,
and a lot of it's adjacent to country.
I was going to say it's all kind of guitar driven, banjo. So then they kind of take that sound and then kind of just put some mid 80s kind of, I don't know, sad boy on it, I guess.
Very sad boy.
Sad boy stank, if you will. Mid 80s Morrissey stank. I loved it. And this is one of those things I wrote down again, is like, if I heard them before the Smiths, I might be picking this album. Because I love the sound. It's just because I tend to gravitate toward a sound, find my band, and then just AKA Steely Dan. I know there is, but that's I'm trying to branch out. I just know how I am. Like, I bought every Pink Floyd album on CD instead of like trying out Yes. I was like, no, I gotta get Ummagumma, even though I know it's crap. I gotta get, my third copy of Dark Side of the Moon because it's a different mix that I'm definitely gonna hear the difference on my crappy little boombox in my room.
You go deep before you go wide. I get that.
Yeah, and that's how I've always been.
Yeah, I'm the same way with certain things too. But the cool thing about Prefab Sprout is, yes, it sounds like 80s, but it's evergreen. Like
it is timeless. It has a timeless.
It doesn't sound dated, even though it does have some 80s production value. By the way, produced by Thomas Dolby, who is a fucking genius.
So yeah, he had that big. His big hit was what? She blinded me with science. But he's like a real, like he's a audio guy. Like he is a tech guy. Is he responsible for like the Dolby digital sound, or is that just a coincidence?
No, coincidence. There's different Dolby, but he did work with, I think, a lot of equipment manufacturers for like synthesizers and recording gear and stuff like that. Like he helped develop and test and, make things better. Like he was a real gearhead apparently. But I'm not sure. It's online. You could probably Google it if you're interested, or anybody who's listening is interested. But I'm not sure how he got hooked up with Prefab Sprout. But I think on the strength of their first album, somehow somebody said to Thomas Dolby, like, hey, you have to check out this band or whatever. And apparently Paddy just had this like shoebox full of songs, like just, lyrics and chord charts and stuff, and I guess, when Dolby sort of drove over to meet with him or whatever, Paddy just whips out a guitar and starts playing stuff. And Dolby's like, well, do you have any more songs like this? And Paddy's like, yeah, I got a whole bunch, we're trying to figure out like what's going on the next record or whatever. So I think that between the two of them, they sat and like cherry picked all the songs that are on Steve McQueen, because Dolby was like, this is a great song. This is a great song. This is a great song, whatever. And they kind of like collaborated on like, building a track list, I think, if I'm remembering the story correctly. So they built these things up from just acoustic demos all the way into these like lushly produced, super sonically tight, songs. Right. And Dolby plays some keyboards, I think, on the album. Yeah. Of course he does.
He has to. Thomas Dolby is always one of those artists that have interested me. He's kind of like a Wendy Carlos, like just innovative, but under the radar. Like everyone knows the name Thomas Dolby, everyone knows the name Wendy Carlos, but like
name 3 songs.
Yeah. When I seen 8-year-old wearing a Nirvana shirt, I just stares and never mind. But also, I think there's a connection too with that because synth. Obviously, Wendy Carlos was like a pioneer, and those old weird synths where you had to like do the things, and you had to like keep tuning the synth.
Yeah,
Thomas
it was
Dolby,
all manual.
yeah, lived in an era where it was easier to play a synth, so therefore you could be more creative.
Right.
But yeah, one of those names, and has always just kind of been around, Thomas Dolby, and is sometimes relegated to a meme, unfortunately, because of that. And I like that song. She Blind with Science, and
it's
the
a great
video.
song.
It's one of those important, like MTV. It's like the Buggles thing, right? And Thriller, like one of those important, for better or for worse, things that put MTV on the map.
Yeah, oh, for sure. And I have another album of his that I really like is called Aliens Ate My Buick. So he's a little quirky, right?
Yeah,
like his solo stuff is a little funny, but it's great. The first song on that is a song called "The Key to Her Ferrari."
Okay.
It's just fabulous. Go listen to it. That's all. It's funny. It's funny. It's got horns. It's just got this great sort of zippy kind of vibe to it. I don't know how else to describe it. And the rest of that album is just great too. There's a song that I think it was a minor hit for him called Hot Sauce. I forget what else is on there. But anyway, so all this to say is and then I think he stuck with them. I think he produced or co-produced the next album for Prefab Sprout, which is From Langley Park to Memphis. But again, another band where, started listening to it because I was drawn to the songs and the sounds and the playing, right? And we have this in common, I think, that we really are drawn to bands with really tight rhythm sections, and this is another one, right?
Yeah,
the bass and the drums on this are just
tight.
But then when I started listening more to the lyrics on Prefab's albums, it's another, Paddy gets deep into cultural references and things that I wasn't aware of. Like, the opening track, right, which is kind of the countrified one, Farron Young.
Yes, great track. Great opening.
Yeah,
great opening track.
Didn't know who Farron Young was, right? Had to go look him up back in the day, and he's the old country singer. Right?
Oh, okay, I was going to say, who is? I actually didn't look it up. So it's an old country singer?
Yeah, never heard of him, right? Because I guess he wasn't as popular, in mainstream culture as like a Johnny Cash or Willie Nelson, but I think he was in that same kind of, realm of right? So I don't know. I'm trying to think what else. I don't know, but there's so many things to explore in their music, and I think it's like Steely Dan, where it never gets old, and I'm still hearing things that maybe I didn't hear. Goodbye Lucille, #1, which was not the original song title. I don't know why they changed all their shit, but the song, I think when it was released in the UK, was just called Johnny Johnny, because that's kind of the refrain. That song is, it's a very clever song, but also musically it does this one cool little thing that I love, where it's life's not complete till your heart's missed a beat. And they kind of miss a beat two different ways when they say that line, the two different times they say it in the song.
I don't think I noticed that. I'll have to go back.
Yeah, you go back and check that out. Like they don't really miss the beat, but they kind of, everything goes off kilter for a beat, and then it picks back up again.
That's awesome.
It's great. It's clever, like you said, without being trite.
Yes. I wrote down one lyric, and it's actually from Farron Young. That just, and once again, unfortunately, I couldn't sit headphones, but I throughout my day I was listening. But Farron Young has this awesome lyric. I think it might be the chorus. You offer infrared instead of sun. Yeah. Or is that it exactly? Yep. And and then it rhymes. You offer paper spoons and bubble gum, but just that line, you offer infrared instead of sun, could say anything, or it could say everything about anything. And it's one of those things where it's like an Empire Strikes Back, where Luke asks Yoda what's in the cave, and he's like, only what you take with you, like that. Right. Only what you take. Anyway, what Yoda's it. But no, it's one of those things, like some songs, like a song like Coming Clean by Green Day is about, Billy Joe coming out, but it could be anything. It could be owning up to something you did. It could be revealing a secret. It's what you take with you. But this one, you offer infrared instead of sun, is just, you get the infrared, which humans kind of have to. It's like, it exists, but to make it happen, we have to produce it. Sun obviously being this natural glowing ball. Some of the stuff's really deep, and what the actual meaning is, we may never know, but it's like you said, it's what you interpret. Bonnie, I think, is, again, it's one of my favorite songs ever, but one of the lyrics on that song is one of my favorite Prefab Sprout lyrics, and it's
I count the hours since you slipped away. I count the hours that I lie awake. Is it a breakup song? Maybe. I don't know, but that's sure how it reads. Yeah, it could be a death song, right? Somebody said that they thought it was written about his father dying, which would make sense, right? Slipped away. But I always, I guess as a young person, that was, always whatever, falling in love and falling out of love, right? Like we all do. I think that's how I, sort of connected to that lyric,
Oh, for sure. And I think it's something to be said about the universal feeling of being in and out of love, that in so many instances, it can be a metaphor of falling in and out of love, could just also be living or dying.
Yeah.
Because, you're, when you're in a good spot with a good person, you feel, 100%. And the second it's over, it's like, then you get a Morrissey sad boy on it and be sad. And it does, I've been through bad breakups, and you feel a little empty afterwards for whatever reason. And no, I wouldn't compare it to death, but if I was a poet or a lyricist, I think that would be a pretty apt description.
Yeah
Cool album. Like I said, another group I never heard of. I don't think I heard of the three you gave me. I might have heard of Buffalo. I probably heard of Buffalo Tom because they're adjacent to Dinosaur Jr., right? They know each other.
Yeah. And the Pixies and Betty Severe, like they were all that sort of like that same sort of, post grunge or, grunge adjacent type bands,
So, but no, so really cool. I because I was ignorant to it. I always considered the Smiths kind of like a weird outlier. I mean, because they're similar to The Cure, kind of, but like not like they're just kind of their own jangly thing. But these are two albums that are, to me, Smiths adjacent in terms of sound, and literally with Lloyd Cole, literally Morrissey adjacent. But just really cool, like a cool sound. I love that jangly sound, and it will give me more variety than the same four Smiths albums, 3 compilations, and 1 live album. Because I don't listen to Morrissey solo stuff. I actually reached out on the pod, the page. There's you should follow him. He's awesome. I think it's All You Need Is Moz. It's just a Morrissey / Smiths. He's like the Steely Phil of Morrissey. Okay. And I reached out to him yesterday, and I'm like, what are the best like Moz solo albums? Because like I know Suede, like the song Suede Head, and that one song that samples Shostakovich's Fifth Symphony, and that's the sample. It's amazing. But so that was cool. But no, I love jangle, love a little country influence, love sad boy lyrics about breakups and just being sad.
Prefab kind of follows, to me, the same trajectory that Lloyd Cole did across the 3 albums. Prefab has more albums, 6 or 7, I think, official studio albums, and maybe more. I'm drawing a blank right now. Anyway, they also sort of develop a bit musically as you go, like more horns and strings and keys and things like that. So worth checking out their 2 albums after this one, 2 or 3 albums after this one.
Cool. Yeah, I think I have I got a couple months till summer, so I'll have to kind of sit on some things, and then got a couple months off where all I do is listen to music and sleep and
cool.
Stop being around humans for a while.
I hear that, man. I hear that.
This was awesome, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again for coming on.
Thanks for having me on. And yeah, we'll be in talks about part 2, right? At some point.
We'll talk about it soon. We should get it on the calendar and get it recorded, because I think we each have 2 other like killer albums to get through.
Oh, for sure. I'm Sundays. That's my
Sundays are good.
Sundays are good. So yeah, hit me up and we'll
make it happen.
out.
All right.
Cool.
Well, Phil, thanks again, and we'll schedule part 2, and we'll talk soon.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Take care. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
You too.
Take care.
See ya.
See ya.